Hello again. So in the last episode we looked at gluing the front onto the guitar, and then trimming it off. So this time we're going to look at doing the binding. So it's going to be cutting the channel and it's going to be then sticking the bindings on and cleaning it all up. So now we need to adapt this mould then to make sure that I can move it around and I can cut these things for the binding. So what I need to do is essentially mark out a wider, because I don't want it right to the edge. So what I want to be able to do is to add some little blocks by the side in several places to hold it steady, otherwise it'll move about and it'll be all over the place. So what I need to do is mark out a certain distance from the edge. So I'm going to make a little, I think a little piece of wood and a pen should be enough, and I'll go around like that. In fact, I've discovered that just the thickness of the pen is probably going to be enough. So if I can basically put the pen level with the side, and then follow the side round like that, and it'll draw me a line. And that's given me something that I can cut out on the bandsaw. So what I've done is I've put some blocks around. So I cut this thing a little bit bigger than the actual guitar, and I've just screwed some blocks in very carefully around the side, probably too many. So you can see now that it's solid, it's solidly attached. So the next thing to do before I actually do any routing is to measure the height. I want to make sure that this is the same height all the way around, otherwise I'm going to get some very strange effects. So after many hours in the research lab, I've built a little pointer thing. So I've strapped a pencil onto a piece of wood at just the right height. So now I can measure this against here, and I can simply turn this around and make sure that the height stays constant all the way around. So that's the first pass done. Now I've forgotten to put tape over the holes. So what I'm going to do is try and hoover out all the dust with this. And I can double check it with just a piece of binding material just to make sure that it's all in. And it does seem to be. I'll try it all the way around and it all works. Worst case is if it's a bit too short, because you can always cut a bit deeper, but you can't cut shallower once it's done. So that's looking good. So that was 1 millimetre. I'm going to add another millimetre on, and then a third, so that I've got a 3mm hole, and then I can put my binding in. And here we go, ready for the next pass. Lock up those holes. And with the power disconnected, very important, just in case this thing goes off, I am removing the bearing from the bit without taking the bit out of the machine, and that way it'll all line up next time round. The only thing that's different will be the depth of the bearing. If I can get it to come off. There we go. Let's get the smaller one. And this is the bearing that will give me a 2mm hole. So let's pop that in place, do up the little screw, and we'll be good to go. And one thing is to make sure this little screw is nice and tight. So what I've done is I've put the little thing through to keep the shaft still while I do this up, and I must not forget to take that out again, otherwise something bad will happen. That's on, free to move, and we'll put the power back on, cut the next one. So that's cut. Trying again with some strips of, this time it's 2mm worth, and that feels about right. So let's swap it over again, do the 3mm. So now again, as with last time, what I'm doing is just looking at all of these, patting the camera down a little bit, just looking at these grooves, and I'm just cleaning up in the grooves, making sure it's all flat and nice, and taking off any sort of extra bits of wood that are sticking up, just so that I can make sure this is all smooth and ready so that I can put the binding in. And once that's done, we can have a quick look-see how this is going to work. So I've got a 1mm white, 1mm black, and then a 1.5mm white one again, so it'll give me this kind of a pattern. And it seems to fit quite nicely, so it protrudes slightly on the top, protrudes slightly at the side, so I can trim it down to fit perfectly. So there we are. Right, let's get some tape and start fitting it. So for each one of these, I've got a little bit of sandpaper, just fold it over. I'm just going to run it along just to give it a bit of a rough edge, so it's going to be a bit easier to glue to, make the super glue stick a bit better. There we are, just take the shine off. Plus it'll take off any extra oil or bits and pieces. Some of these have like an extra plastic coating that hides. So this is just like 120 sandpaper. Don't know whether it's too rough or not, but it seems to do the trick quite nicely, just to scratch that and dull that surface off. Drop it all on the floor. Also gets off any dust that's picked up. So, like for instance, when you drop it on the floor like that. So, clean that up. There we go. And now go back and re-clean the other one I've just dropped on the floor, and we're good to go. So just like last time, for the long one that reaches all the way around, balance on my finger, find the middle, which is about there. That goes in there, turn it that way up, and we'll get the other two, and they go in starting there. So we'll line those up, trying to keep them off the floor and all the dust. Like that, and then with a little bit of tape I can start sticking that in place. And the hardest part really is getting the first bit done. It's also finding the end of the tape. There it is. So just get a bit of that, and the easiest way, to be honest, is to stick a few strips of tape on the side there, and then you've got them to hand. So I've just got a little bit of masking tape over to start with, just to hold them in a rough place while I move these about. Make sure they're all lined up. And I put my first bit of proper tape, so I'm putting it on the body first, quite a long bit, and then I pull it over the top quite tight, stick it down. I can then get rid of the masking tape, and I can start going around just like last time, until it's all in place. So make sure that's all seated properly. And there we go. Let's carry on round. So with all that in place, I double check on everything to make sure it's all tight against the edges, and it's all tight all around the sides as well. And we can start adding super glue, just like the last time. I've started in this top corner. I'll just add a drip in between all of the bits of tape, and it will soak in. So make sure you put it on top of there and underneath, and it'll flow down the gaps, and it'll fix it all together, and it'll fix it in place. Okay, this one needs, okay, quite a big blob in there. And again, I may be some time. Now once the top one's dried, I can go around and do the same just around underneath here. Try and make sure to get glue in everywhere. So now that the glue's had overnight to dry, I'm taking a little saw and I can just trim off these ends. So they're nice and flat, and I can use the flat here to guide the saw. Okay, so let's get the tapes off. And now, just like we did on the bottom, one block plane, and we can take off the edges. So I've deliberately made these slightly too high, just in case. Better to be too high and plane it off than too low and be stuck with a gap. So I can just now carefully go around, spend a little bit of time planing these off. And then it can just be finished off with a cabinet scraper just like before, just to clean up those edges and get them perfect. Now looking at this as I progress, there are one or two places like here where there's a bit of a gap that's been left, and I need to fix that in a nice way. In fact, there's a little bit of a gap around that top corner as well. So this is a little bit of, if I'll do in front of the camera, this is a little bit of acetone in a jar. Now acetone melts this stuff, so a lot of these shavings, I'm careful to only choose the white ones, can in fact be dropped into that acetone, and what will happen is they'll melt. The other thing I can put in, if I haven't got enough shavings, is little bits of the actual stuff, so I can just break that into little bits, chuck that in, and eventually that will all melt and form sort of a sludge, and that sludge I can use as a filler in these gaps. So once you've made some of this sludgy stuff, what you can do is just apply it to the gaps. There we are. It dries pretty quickly. And then leave it to dry and you can clean it up. That's had an hour or so to dry now. So I can now take a bit of sandpaper or a scraper and just clean that up a little bit. And that's just with a very little bit. And there we are. There was a gap there, and now there's not. And that's looking all right. There's a little bit more cleaning up, but there we are. Nice clean fix. Now I've almost gone as far as we can with this guitar build, because the next thing to do is to build the neck. And I will cut the fret slots and the fret slots. I'll cut the slots for the pickups later on, and drill the holes for the various other bits and bobs that go in here. So the only final thing to do really is to clean it up, give it a good sand before we put it away somewhere safe for a while. For that, I'm just using a detail sander. This has got 150 grit paper on it, just so I can sand it down. The other thing I've noticed, there's one or two little gaps down the middle here. So what I shall do is put a squirt of super glue in there, and then put some of the dust that I sand into the gap, and that'll just seal that gap up. And now with the guitar body almost finished, I think it's time for a rogues gallery of the various interesting ones that we've had. So this is the first one. Remember, this was steamed, gone quite a little bit not guitar shaped, hasn't it? So it's 2 layers steamed together, glued with epoxy while it was wet, and you can see completely curled up, delaminated all over the place, and not really that usable. Might be useful as some sort of spoon, but apart from that, not very good. This is the second attempt, so it's a little bit better, very little bit better. So this one, remember this one, I got them all wet in the bath and then glued them together straight away with, this was with water-based glue, so aliphatic resin glue, thinking that that would dry along, but as you can see, it's all completely cracked up as it's dried, curled up, not as badly as the original, that first one, but it's still pretty appalling. Third one then, now this was dry pressed. Now this was using the same technique that I'm using now, but I used Cascamite as the glue, and as you can see, it's all delaminating, it's all coming apart. The back bit here doesn't look too bad. In fact, it's a lot better than the other ones, but it's still got quite a big crack along there where it's bent. It's starting to crack along the middle bit here as well where it's tried to bend, but it's generally quite a decent shape. And then obviously we come on to the final one, which is a nice shape. So it's held its shape, and I kept it in a press while I wasn't using it. And in fact, this used slightly tougher, slightly thicker plywood. And when I say thicker, certainly slightly stronger plywood made with, what was it, poplar. And it seemed to be firmer and stronger. So it's given us quite a good sort of solid construction on that one. So that is pretty much finished. You can see the bindings on there. I can hold them up, come up well, and then the bindings on the other side, which are a bit thinner. And there we are. That is the guitar body pretty much done. So it's time, I think, to move on to the neck. Now that's quite a long one, but hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully that was informative. Please give me a like if you liked it. Don't forget to press subscribe. Maybe I'll see you next time.